I was startled awake by a sound. My hazy mind tried to track it down and identify it. I sat up in my dark bedroom, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The sound continued. It wasn't just a dream or the remnants of a dream. It was rhythmic and mechanical. I rose and started towards it, using my cell phone as a makeshift flashlight. As I stepped closer to my desk, I realized it was my printer. It finished printing out a page and went back into sleep mode. I wish I could go back to sleep that easily, but now I'm awake and have a minor mystery to solve. I pulled the sheet of paper out and stared at it using my phone for light. All I could see were a few minor smudges. I padded over to the door and turned on the overhead light, blinking hard as my eyes adjusted. There are times when I wish I wasn't so curious. Times when I wish I would let things go. I could have shrugged this off as a printer malfunction and gone back to bed. Yeah, that would have been much better. I would have actually gotten a few more hours of sleep then. But once I saw what was on the paper, nap time was over. I lunged for my bedstand, ripped open the drawer, and grabbed my pistol. I pulled the slide halfway back to make sure there was a round in the chamber and held my phone in front of me for light with the pistol in my right hand. I crept out of my bedroom, checking corners as I went. I searched one room at a time, keeping an ear open for any sound. I cleared the bathroom, hallway, living room, and kitchen of my small apartment. Nothing. I checked the front door and found the deadbolt still locked, with no traces of tampering. Feeling dazed and a little more than confused, I turned back towards the bedroom when I caught a glimpse of the glass doors that led to the balcony. I raised my gun and started toward the door. The moon was shining bright outside, giving the curtains an eerie glow. When I pulled them back, bathed the room in moonlight. This door also was locked. I sighed and chided myself for my overactive imagination when I saw something on the door. It was 5 fingerprints, like someone had pressed their hand to the glass. I held up the paper from my printer to the glass, and the 2 sets of prints matched in size and spacing. A chill ran through me as I realized the prints were on the inside of the glass. I took a picture of the prints on the glass with my phone. Then I dressed and drove to the station, trying not to look over anxious, but not obeying the speed limit either. The sergeant on duty was surprised to see me 3 hours early for my shift, but couldn't sleep was a regular excuse nowadays. I'd been working some long and strange hours with my last case. I went to my desk and scanned the paper into my computer, then ran the prints through a recognition program. It didn't take long for the result to come in, and the name that showed up was impossible. I downloaded the picture from my phone and ran the program again. It came up with the same result. The 2 sets of prints were from the same person. I sat back in shock as icicles ran up and down my spine. I grabbed the phone and made a quick call.
Larson County Morgue, Joe speaking,
came a bored-sounding voice after the 10th ring.
This is Detective Smith from the Larson Police. I need you to check on something for me.
I heard a heavy sigh.
Yeah, what do you need?
We've had reports of people tampering with corpses.
I lied.
Could you check out a certain one for me?
Did I already say yes?
Oh, I guess you did. The name is Thomas Eugene Calsolo.
Silence on the other end.
You mean the mass murderer?
That's the one.
Wait a minute. Detective Smith, I know that name. You're the one who put Calsolo on ice.
It was a group effort. Would you please check for me?
Check what?
To see if he's still there.
Where else would he be?
Just check.
Okay.
He put the phone down none too lightly, and I could hear him shamble away. I heard a door opening and a drawer being pulled out. Then I heard a muffled, and fast footsteps returned.
Detective, I don't know how, but he's gone.
What?
He wasn't scheduled to... No.
I heard the phone drop, sounds of a struggle, and the man was screaming. Then there was silence, an awful silence. I jumped to my feet and was about to run out when I heard laughter on the phone.
Dude, did I get you?
Well, what?
Did you fall for it?
Joe said. I slammed the phone down so hard it bounced. I had to think. This couldn't be real. Something else was happening. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let my thoughts drift back in time. Thomas Eugene Colsolo was executed by lethal injection 2 days ago. I didn't squeeze the syringe, but I did everything I could to make sure he got what was coming to him. He knew it too. As I sat there in the observatory, he glared at me the entire time. He didn't do anything as obvious as yell at me or threaten me, but those cold eyes never left mine. I didn't care. Good riddance as far as I was concerned. He had left a trail of bodies from the West Coast to Larson, where I finally caught him. Even during his interrogation, he showed no remorse. He babbled on about being some sort of god.
Then why doesn't your deity conjure yourself out of prison?
I asked. His response was the same cold stare that he gave me up until the moment he died. There had never been any evidence of an accomplice, so my next logical thought was a copycat. Some other sick mind somehow became inspired by this sick mind. I wondered if mental illness was communicable in some cases. I dug around some more, but kept hitting dead ends. I had a stack of open cases on my desk that needed attention, so I let this drop and went on with my normal day. But on the way home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought some new locks for my front door and patio door. Installing them made me feel about 1% better. Something about this didn't sit well. I went to bed and fell into a fitful sleep. I woke at 3:15 a.m. to the sound of my printer. I sprung out of bed with my pistol in my hand and pelted out into the living room. I turned on all the lights and checked the locks. Neither had been tampered with. The same 5 fingerprints were on the patio door. I hadn't cleaned them off. I grabbed the Windex and took care of that. I cautiously returned to the bedroom, checking the bathroom and closet as I went. When I got there, I pulled the paper out of the printer, and sure enough, there were the fingerprints. Only, they looked different. I finally figured out what it was. There were only 4. The thumbprint was missing. I found it hard to work that day. All I could think about was this stupid prank someone was playing on me. Or was it a prank? No, it had to be. That was the only logical explanation. I called my brother-in-law and lied to him about wanting to go hunting next week so I could borrow his trail cam. I set it up in my bedroom to record any movement. With an infrared mode, it wouldn't matter if the lights were off. There would still be an image. By the time I got home, it was time for bed. I aimed it at the printer and laid down. Sleep eluded me for a long time. Anxiety and excitement swirled together and milked my adrenal gland. Eventually, sleep took me. I woke at 3:15 to the sound of the printer. I launched myself out of bed, grabbed my gun, and searched the apartment. After finding no one there, I came back to the trail cam, pulled out the memory card, and downloaded it to my computer. It seemed to take ages as I sat staring at the progress bar. When it finally finished, I watched the video playback. It was disturbing seeing everything awash in the ghostly greenish white of the infrared video. I watched myself toss and turn in my sleep in the background as the printer loomed large on the screen. In retrospect, I may have set the camera a little too close to the printer. I watched as the seconds ticked by like drips from a leaky faucet. I felt my attention wane and found the fast-forward button. Watching myself toss and turn at high speed made it look like I was in a life-and-death wrestling match with my blanket. I would have laughed if I wasn't thinking about the very real struggle going on. The image flashed and changed. I stopped it and rewound. Playing at regular speed, something faint moved near the printer before it turned on. 5 seconds later, the video showed me jumping out of bed and tearing out of the room. A minute later, I returned and turned off the video. I rewound and watched again. It was a faint image, like a whiff of smoke that blew over to the printer right before it turned on. I watched over and over again, sometimes at full speed, sometimes frame by frame. It stayed the same. A slight mist, then the printer turned on right when the time read 3:15. I slumped back in my chair. Something was nagging at me. There was something I was missing. I stared at the printer with suspicion, as though it were a witness that was hiding the truth. I ran every diagnostic possible, printed page after page of test runs. I pulled them all out, and every one showed the printer was working normally. The last page was blank, except for 3 fingerprints. That day at work was a coffee-fueled blur. It's amazing how busy you can make yourself when there's something you want to avoid doing. I had no desire to tell anyone about my nightly problem. I had no idea who I would even tell. Any reasonable person I knew would either laugh in my face or give me the number for a good shrink. If someone else had told me this was happening to them, I would have laughed in their face, then told them to stop watching scary movies late at night. I was stuck. I couldn't ignore that something was happening, but I couldn't figure out what it was without stumbling into ludicrous possibilities. I refused to acknowledge the G word. It had to be something else. Someone had figured out a way to get in my apartment, mess with my printer, and leave a dead man's prints on my door, all without leaving a trace. Sounds reasonable. My mind was doing flip-flops. I was wound so tight from lack of sleep and an abundance of paranoia, I nearly jumped out of my chair when someone slammed a door. Damn it, this bastard was winning. I'd let him get inside my head, and he was toying with me. I'd even checked the security cameras all around my apartment building with no success. There was nothing moving around 3:15 except for a few alley cats that became agitated around that time. I had to try something different. I went home, sat in my lazy boy, and tried to relax, but every sound made me twitch. It's funny how you never realize how loud things are until you're hyper-paranoid and haven't slept for days. That'll turn the volume way up on things you'd never noticed. Listening to the clock tick was like someone driving a nail into my brain, one hammer blow at a time. The dripping faucet in the kitchen was like Chinese water torture. It wasn't like me to be passive about facing a problem, especially one of a criminal nature, but I was handcuffed. I had nothing to do and nowhere to go with this, at least not without having a room reserved for me at the mental institution. Somehow, I fell asleep in the chair. I lay on an operating room table, unable to move. The bright light shone in my face. There was no beeping of machines, no monitors or anything else that suggested my life hung in the balance. As I searched the room, I noticed there was a row of windows near the ceiling. Angry faces stared down at me. The biggest surprise of all was one of them was my own. My face stared back at me with a look of anger, tinged with smug satisfaction. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't move. My eyes darted from one face to the next, silently pleading for help. All I saw was anger. The doctor leaned over and stared into my eyes. I recognized him and tried with every ounce of energy to scream, to speak, to make any sound, to let people know. It was Colsolo. He smiled, but didn't say a word. He looked up at the wall clock that said 3:14 and counted down the seconds as he held the needle, ready to press the plunger. I watched in silent fury as the seconds ticked relentlessly towards the 12. When it reached, he smiled, and I screamed. I sat bolt upright in my chair, reaching instinctively for my arm. No IV, no needle, no operating room. I sat back in my chair and breathed a sigh of relief, not noticing my visible breath right away. I shivered and got up to check my thermostat. When I passed the clock, I noticed it read 3:15. I looked over at the patio door. It was frosted over, yet the thermometer read 75 degrees. As I watched, 2 fingerprints appeared on the door. I haven't been back to my apartment since. I feel like a criminal on the run, staying in a dingy hotel, trying to avoid being seen. I don't even remember how I got here. I'm not even sure if I locked my apartment door. I'm not sure of anything anymore. There's nothing to investigate. I saw with my own eyes something that should be impossible. Who do I tell about that? Do I go to Madame Carla's house of the future and have her tell me I'm doomed? Drinking a lot of alcohol seems to be a reasonable alternative. So here I sit, a bottle in hand, watching reruns of Gilligan's Island at 2 a.m. I ponder on the age-old debate that has never been settled. Marianne or Ginger? I'd go for Marianne. Ginger was too snooty, too full of herself. I have to think of foolish things like that to keep me sane, to keep me from eating a bullet. It suddenly feels chilly in here.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed that, please consider subscribing for more. I've been your host, Tom, and until next time,
Stay sleepless.